a newed up state into the object is it places the responsibility on the calling layer to new up that object. It's usually easier, though a little redundant, to go ahead and define an enumerator or an enum that can be passed in to set a state for you, or pass in a value that can be calculated by the player. Now, to go against the cut a little bit, while the latter is usually my preference, to pass in something like we use the time and then have it decide if the event had started or not, we want to actually, in this case, remove some of that power from the player. So this will be fine for now. And if we hit a wall, so we're not going to pre-optimize, but if we hit a wall, we might come back and see about changing this up to something a little more lightweight than having somebody else new up and take that responsibility. Okay, so as it stands, having a state doesn't affect very much. And to be honest, we don't quite know enough in terms of patterns to say how we would have that affect us. Where would it affect us? Right now, when a game request comes in, when somebody commits an action, we've got this nice little execute statement that says, hey, call the fight method and then return back this message. And then inside of our player, our fight takes into account our strategy for fighting and then any boost that we might calculate. The calculation of the boost comes from any items we might be wearing. So we've done quite a bit in terms of the functionality here. And if you had a state that was going to interrupt certain things, where would it make that interruption? It could be here, in the same way that this is happening, right? So this is returning back a double, and we could wrap this whole thing in some function. So we could wrap this whole thing in a method that takes in the result and then applies any further modifications to it. That'd be fine if we always knew that our state was going to have a positive or negative effect only on that return value of double. And we don't know that, because we don't know whether or not we want a state the player is in to cancel out an action completely. And that puts it outside the scope of this responsibility. And so we back it up a little bit. And we say, okay, let's go back into the base actor. Is there any place here we might want to evaluate first, right? This is actually a really good place for it, because I'm sorry, I got distracted by Canadian 2 says, nice to see a black man programmer. Funny story, and I am never one to play the skin game or the gender game, but I went to San Francisco for the Microsoft Build Conference, and yeah, I was a unicorn of sorts. For better or worse. Sorry, hang on. And so, you, after a lifetime of being a unicorn, again, for better or worse, and I apologize for the rant, but for better or worse, after a lifetime of being a unicorn, you do feel a little special, right? It's when you're the representative of a certain type for a long time, you kind of wear that badge a little bit, and you don't know what's happening. So, lesson to everyone who thinks they're immune to cognitive biases and, they're above the fray, so to speak, you're affected. You've got your damage. So yeah, it's funny. Okay, so socio-political rants aside, so this is a great place to go ahead and put in our state, because we can cancel things here. And the responsibility of this execute method is to return a game response. So this is great, because you've got a state. We know what state the player is in. Presumably it was set by the HiveMind game engine for us. But we can decide here, instead of our base actor, check this out. So let's do a var game response up here is equal to new game response. Canadian 2 asks, is this an app? It's actually an homage to old school text-based role-playing games and MUD engines. And every week we've been learning a new design pattern and applying it to this game. So if you go back into the archives of my video that are down on the channel to week 1, we hadn't written any of this. And then we started off only using the factory pattern, and then only using the strategy pattern. And we got to a point where we actually are working on a game engine now to interpret commands and such. So not sure what the end result is going to be. I might make it an IRC game, so that when you're in IRC, you could private message the game master and play a few rounds, and so anyone in IRC could play. I think that'd be a fun kind of underground thing for it, and also get us into some of the more advanced patterns for, distributed computing and latency and load and all that. Yeah, so it's fully text-based right now. But we also see that we're doing the business logic here, or the core functionality, right, inside of this domain, inside of core. So it is going to be, a game master. So if you wanted to put a web front end on it, or you wanted to put a Unity front end on it, you could always query the game for your business logic. So it's also kind of an example of how this in-tier design and applications allows you to be presentation tier agnostic. So that's part of it. All right. So what we're doing is we're going to go ahead and make a new game response up here. Previously we were newing one up in line, but we're adding functionality now. So we're going to go ahead and pull it out of that switch statement. And then when we are here, so just to kind of show how this would be done, we're going to say game response is equal, game response dot message is equal to this. And then here, we would simply return game response. So this is also a great little example of how this conciseness is awesome. It's a great first step, and now we're kind of breaking out of that so we can do some more lifting. Okay, so we're just going to demonstrate why this is a good place to do this. So we can say if actor state dot, and we'll say name. This would also be the benefit of an enum, but we'll worry about that in a second. So right now, I'm just going to say if acroState.name is equal to drunk. Nah. Let's do something that's more definite. Yeah, disabled. If this is equal to disabled, we want to do something else. We want to do something else, right? That's what else does. Otherwise, we want to fight. Okay. But if it's disabled, we can return it back. Oh, and previously, when we were doing this, we only figured out the heal command. So let's go ahead and fix this up, just like we have heal down here, because we need to return back a little more information with the fight. So var amount is equal to this dot fight. Oops. Come back up here. We'll say double amount, and we'll initialize it with 0, 0. Oops. That's fine. It's a double. I can take it. All right. Take that off. Take that off. It's happier now. And just to show it, we're going to throw a D on that. And so this signifies that this 0 is of type double. If you're doing decimal, it'd be an M. Probably good practice to show it. I usually don't care. The reason why I showed it here was because I like how ReSharper says, hey, before it wasn't clear what you were doing on that side of the operator. So the explicit declaration of the type was great. As soon as you threw that D on there, ReSharper says, you know what? You could put var there, and it's still pretty clear what this is supposed to be. So pick your poison, pick your whatever. We're doing this kind of from a beginner stance, so I'm gonna leave the redundancy in there for now. So people, when they see it, they don't do much thinking. It's obvious. There's enough here to process without having to think too hard about implicit and explicit variables and B's and M's on the end of numbers. Okay. Canadian 2 asks, any particular reason why you chose C# for the game? So I'm doing this series called C# Design Patterns, and the complexity of a game offers a really nice place to use pretty much every design pattern possible. There's a good chance in your career or even in your hobby life, if you're writing like applications, you might not ever have need for a lot of the design patterns that are out there, but they're things you should keep sharp and you should understand and lend some validity to the gaming community as well by saying, hey, if you're writing games, if you're really writing games and you can show me a game that you've written, that's a place that's probably really rich in code, design patterns, and best practices. It's actually a great little Mr. Miyagi tool. And if you don't know who Mr. Miyagi is, how can I say it? So he taught a young gentleman how to fight via techniques that were not related to fighting at all, or so he thought. And then when it came time to fight, it turned out that all these innocuous things he was doing were actually teaching him how to fight. All right. So, attacks for blank. That's when we pass in the amount. And then down here with the heal,